I'm joined now from Ankara by Necati Anaz. He is the Assistant Professor of International Security at the Turkish National Police Academy. And here in the studio with me now, I also have Gulnur Aybet. She is the Director of Security Studies at Bahçeşehir University. Thanks both so much for joining us. It seems very much that the Turkish Deputy Prime Minister there, Kurtulmuş, has been very specifically reaching out to the international community for support in what he calls the fight against terrorism. It is complicated, though, because what Turkey defines as terrorist groups sometimes does not correspond with what allies see as terrorist groups. So, Gulnur, let me start with you. What exactly is Turkey asking for here?
I mean, like the Deputy Prime Minister said, more than dry words, obviously. Greater solidarity and support for the fight that Turkey is facing with its own terror problem with the PKK, not just with Daesh. So there's a two-front war, and this is a unique position that no other NATO country is in at the moment. Only NATO is facing a two-front war in this sense on terror. And also, I suppose he was referring to a better understanding and more empathy with Turkey's insistence that the Syrian YPG and the PKK within Turkey are one and the same thing. Now, as we know that some of Turkey's allies have not been taking the same stance. So this, I think, in terms of that, he wants extra international cooperation. But also, I think he's also referring to the fact that because terror groups are linked to and tap into quite easily international networks that supply them. He's also referring to greater international cooperation to somehow circumvent the flow of these networks to terrorist organizations.
Okay, let's cross over to Ankara. Necati, do you think Turkey will get the support it wants from the international community in this respect?
International community has to support Turkey because this Syrian crisis and the Turkey's struggle against PKK and PYD is not only the matter of Turkey. It is an international crisis, and it's an international business, and international community has to involve in this. They cannot stay away from this problem. They cannot leave Turkey alone fighting against PKK, PYD, ISIL. They have to support Turkey. This is not something that is negotiable. Otherwise, we would be talking about European security. We would be talking about international terrorism that cannot be controlled within where now, if they put forth their effort, can be controlled in Syria and some small part of this region.
But Necati, if you, in a sense, suspect that the PKK may have something to do with this attack, and Kurtulmuş is reaching out to the international community to support them in their fight against what they generally define as terror, but actually mean the PKK and its affiliates in Syria, the YPG in particular, how will common ground be found? Because, as we said, the United States does not see the YPG as a terrorist organization. It sees the YPG as an ally in the fight against another terrorist organization. So you can say Turkey deserves this help from the international community, but if they can't find consensus on who the enemy is, where do you go?
We know that this is not just only Turkey's problem, and we know that this is not just a simple counterterrorism effort. And there is more going on in the region. It's a geopolitical problem. There are interests of different countries, and there are also different countries games and interests in that region. So it's not the only PYD is a matter of calling it a terrorist organization or not. I think the problem is bigger than just calling PYD is a terrorist organization. but the United States have to come and understand Turkey's concerns. Again, if they think that they should, when they leave Turkey alone with this PKK and the PYD problem, they will be safe and they will be immune to this problem, but they are deadly wrong, I think. They will have to understand and also come to a table and talk and also hear Turkey's concerns about this issue.
Okay, Gulnur, let me ask you, Turkey is obviously asking for what would equate to military support in respect to fighting terrorist groups. But is there any chance that there could be perhaps more dialogue involved? Because it has worked in the past with the PKK. But is that perhaps not the direction at all Turkey is looking at, especially seeing how serious this conflict has gotten and how Syrian forces have been drawn in?
Well, I mean, the question there is, who do you talk to? I mean, you know, obviously it's this government that actually started the peace process, but then the PKK broke the ceasefire. And when we look at what the PKK have been trying to do, along with their affiliates in Syria, is using the situation and the war in Syria as an opportunity to get some, you know, do something militarily and you know, try to aim for some kind of secession. They wanted to, I mean, when you look at the tactics that the YPG have been following just across the border, grabbing more land and self-declaring these cantons, and then what the PKK is doing with this new onslaught of urban warfare and cutting off the access to security forces, you can see what their end game is. They are not interested in peace. I mean, I'm sure that if the Syrian war ended tomorrow, the PKK would immediately stop their hostilities. For them, this is an opportunity. So when you're actually dealing with terrorist groups who have a deliberate strategy of this kind, who do you talk to? And I think this is a real question that we have to ask ourselves. And we have to ask the allies of NATO and also the international community. How far are they going to stand with Turkey in this very dire fight against terror?
What is concerning, though, here now is if, and again, we are speculating because responsibility for this attack has not yet been claimed. We don't know who's responsible.
Exactly, yeah.
But PKK and Daesh are the primary suspects,
yes.
and this does bear more hallmarks of PKK strategy. There has been some criticism, particularly from the international community, about how Turkey has handled the war against the PKK terrorist organization in the east of the country. How might that complicate, if this international criticism comes in further about how Turkey has managed the war on the ground against the PKK, how will that complicate Turkey getting support in its fight against its own terrorist elements in this country?
Well, I think the case is very clear as to how Turkey has been dealing with the terrorist attack. I mean, the PKK broke the ceasefire in the first place, and then they literally forced the state to securitize the problem, if you like, which they hadn't before. So when the PKK are following a strategy of digging trenches, not allowing the security forces to go in, self-declared autonomy, what do you expect the state to do but to securitize the problem and clear those areas? So, you know, it's really been a very tricky situation in the sense that, you know, sadly, you know, it's the same government that started the peace process that then had to, you know, deal with this terror attack. So I think at the end of the day, the international community and particularly NATO's allies have to come to some understanding, particularly those who have had to deal with their own terror problems in the past. There are countries that have faced very similar problems, and I don't see why they can't show some empathy towards what Turkey's going through now.
Okay, I just want to get one final statement from Ankara then. And Necati, I'd just like to get your thoughts on what you've just heard.
Could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
I just actually wanted to get your final thoughts on what you just heard. And as we were saying, there has been some international criticism of how Turkey has fought the war against the terrorist PKK in the east of the country, and it might make it difficult for Turkey to reach out and get the support it's looking for in its fight here against terrorism.
We know that Turkey has been succeeded against some of the PKK's tactics in the east. In that, Turkey has some experience in dealing with PYD. If the international community steps up and allows Turkey at least to secure its border. That is the main goal, that international security has to support Turkey. That if we do not have a clear secure border, I'm afraid that we will have more attacks here and there. And if international community leave Turkey alone, fighting against terrorism, this cannot be sustained. Terror will attack and again, and this struggle continue, and we will have more fear and yeah.
Okay, Necati Anaz and Gulnur Aybet, I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us.